today we're going to talk about some next steps for your Google My Maps project. So what you should have done already is take vocabulary from the Quizlet and sort it into the different categories. If your vocabulary is not lined up exactly like mine, don't worry. Some of them for sure have places that they need to be, like Compromise of 1850 should be in the Compromise of 1850 layer, but some of them can be other places, so don't worry about that. We then have this pink sheet. So you picked up this pink sheet on Friday if you were here. And the way the pink sheet is organized is, one, each layer or each of these little segments matches up with your 8 layers on this green sheet. And then each segment has 2 questions. And the first question is a where or a what parts kind of a question. And remember that in the end we need to put this onto a map. So the very first question in each of these topics is meant to help you figure out how you're going to get it on the map. So what kind of marker you're going to use, like one of those place markers, what kind of line you might use, or maybe you might even use a shape. The second question then is more of the content question. It's the information question. And that question is what, when you put a shape on the map or you put a marker on the map, there's a little text box that pops up. And you're going to put stuff into that text box. So the second question is the information that you'll end up putting into those text boxes. So I'm going to show you a quick demo of my second layer and what that might look like on my map. So if I go to my map, the first thing is that you are going to end up creating 8 different layers. So here's my first layer on the slave trade, north-south layer, Underground Railroad layer, Missouri Compromise, and so on. There'd be 8 of them. On my first layer, so far, I have a line that represents the Middle Passage, and I've got some information in here. Now, I'm not going to type any more than that because you guys have to do that kind of thinking on yours. But if I, on this line, my goal would be to answer the question, how does the slave trade impact both Africa and the United States? And I'm getting that from my pink sheet. So I would end up typing that answer in this box. So on my second layer, north versus south, I'm going to do a little bit of planning first, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. So the first question here says, where in the mid-1800s are the largest cities and states in the north? In the south? So I might have to do a little bit of research for some of these questions, but I found that the 3 biggest states in the north in 1850 were New York, Pennsylvania, and Ohio, and the 3 biggest in the south were Virginia, Tennessee, and Kentucky. So what I'm going to plan to do on my map is to drop a place marker on each one of those states. So I'm going to go back to my map. I've actually already started this. If you watched my video before, you know that you have to make sure that this blue bar right here is on the layer that you want to insert the states on or insert your line on or whatever. So I've already entered in New York, Pennsylvania, and Ohio, and I'm just going to keep adding here Virginia. So I'm going to search it up here. I'm going to say add to map, and you'll notice that a little pin drops here. Tennessee, add to map, and Kentucky. So when I zoom out on my map, you can see all of my place markers here. You can also see that if I deselect my slave trade layer, that I just have the pins from my north-south layer, which is what I want. So now I've figured out how I was going to get it on the map. Now I've got to fill those place markers with some information. This is how you're going to communicate with me that you understand the topics and the concepts we've learned about. So this question then that goes with it says, how do the North and South differ in economy, education, politics, and stance on tariffs? So my job is to figure out how I'm going to get that answer to that question along with the vocabulary that I wanted to put on this layer onto those pins. I have this planning sheet that I made just on a loose leaf sheet of paper. You don't need to do this, but I'm just going to really lay it out clearly for you. So here's that question I just read to you. Here's the vocab that I want to get in. Now here's how I'm going to make my plan. So again, on each one of those pins that I just put on my map, these 6, I want to figure out how to get my answer to this question and my vocabulary all on those 6 pins. So here's how I'm going to plan it. On my New York marker, I'm going to write a response in that description box about the economy of the North, because that's part of the question. And I'm going to include tariffs and my explanation about tariffs. So that's going to not only help answer this part of the question, but it also gets one of my vocab words in there that I want to include. I'm going to go back to my map. I'm going to go back to my New York pin. I'm going to click the pencil, and I'm going to add this information in writing in this little description box. So here's what I started typing, just very brief again, because some of you guys are going to use these ideas. So you can make yours more detailed than mine. You should. But my response says the economy of the northern states included factories and it relied on manufacturing. The North liked tariffs, taxes on imported goods, because ... And I would keep explaining there. So if I go back to my plan, I have included the economy of the North stance on tariffs, and one of my vocabulary words. Now I'm going to plan for my second marker and what I'm going to put on that marker. So my second marker, Virginia, I'm going to explain the economy of the South, because this question asks me to show the differences between the North and the South, which is going to be about farming and plantations, and I'm going to include the vocabulary word sectionalism, because I want to explain how the South cared more about their group of states than they did the entire country. So I'm going to explain that vocabulary word on my Virginia marker. So I keep planning like this, and once I figure out how to get all of the information onto that layer, then I'm done with it. And you can actually use your lines as a little checkbox to say, okay, all that stuff is on my map. And then you move on to the next layer, which is the Underground Railroad. So you go back to your map, you move to the Underground Railroad one, you make sure this blue bar is there, and now you have the same job. You need to figure out how you're going to represent on your map where the Underground Railroad began and ended, and using a line, a marker, or a shape. And then you're trying to answer the question, how did the members of the Underground Railroad travel north and communicate safely? And then don't forget that if you have any vocabulary, you're trying to make sure that you get that in there too. So you want to combine what you planned on your green sheet with the questions on your pink sheet in order to get it onto your map. That's it. I'll be around for questions, and obviously let me know, but hopefully that makes some sense.